Welcome, this is Roger Priebe, and we're going to learn about abstract data types.
Well,
I don't know what we're going to learn about. Let's go.
I'm just going to talk as if this is the beginning of my data structures class.
Gotcha.
Okay? Just to give you a feel for my teaching style and what I talk about and how I talk about things. And so this, I'm just going to make believe you're all my students.
I'm looking forward to learning something.
And so...
Is it going to be on the test? Sorry, I'll be quiet.
Maybe.
This is kind of fun. As students, we get to give a grade on the teacher.
Yeah. So, many of you decided to go into computer science because you like computers. You like to play on computers. You've used them your whole life. But what I want to talk a little bit about today is that computer science is really the study of algorithms, and the various parts of algorithm development, including the formal and mathematical properties. So we want to study how algorithms are made. Are they efficient? Do they give us the right answers? Okay, regardless of the computer it's run on. We want to talk about that we have to build hardware to run the software ultimately. So the hardware realizations of these things. Languages, linguistic realizations. So the languages that we use to write our programs to implement these algorithms, and then ultimately not particularly useful if we don't have applications for these algorithms. Okay? Briefly, I want to talk about what I think the hardware is going to look like in my head, and so what I want to think, what I want you to think about. Okay, so the basic scheme of what I want you to think about a computer to look like: it's a CPU, memory, and some kind of input and output. Okay? Connected together with some way to get information back and forth. Okay? If it doesn't have these things, we're not going to count it as a computer. Okay? Lastly, I want to talk just a little bit about some special memory called the cache. But if this is our sort of hardware, what we're thinking about of what a computer is, I want to give one thing that you'll remember for today. Okay? And that is that memory is important. Okay? Memory is important. And let me give a brief analogy as to why. Okay? So, it's Super Bowl Sunday. Okay? You are in front of your television set. And you are the CPU. You're the processing unit. Okay? And our instructions are beers. Okay? Each one's a beer. Okay? Now,
CPU's getting drunk.
we're going to ignore all the biological implications of this. Okay? For right now. We're going to ignore the biological implications. You're sitting in your favorite comfy chair, and right next to you, you've got a little fridge. Okay? Full of your beers. Okay? And you're processing them. And eventually, what's going to happen?
I get drunk.
No, we're ignoring the biological implications.
The I/O system.
Eventually,
That's true. I
eventually,
empty my bladder.
the cache becomes empty, right? And what do you have to do?
You gotta get some more out of men.
You got to get some more from where? From your fridge.
Yep.
Right? So, this is your fridge. Eventually you have to go, how much do you get? Do you get one? No. You get enough to refill your little fridge, and then you continue to process. Okay? Maybe if you're lucky you have friends. I know you're in computing, so maybe you're by yourself, but Maybe you've even got friends, so you've got more than one processor. Eventually, when this process happens over and over again, what's going to happen? Your fridge is going to get empty, right? Your fridge will become empty as well. Then what?
The HEB.
Yeah, but the HEB's in San Antonio.
Oh, that's what?
Because it's 1,000 times slower to get to your secondary storage than your memory. Right? It's really slow. You got to drive. And meanwhile, if you have friends, they're just sitting and waiting, right? They got nothing to do until you refill your fridge and refill your little fridge. So, how much do you bring back from secondary storage?
A lot.
A lot. Enough to fill your fridge.
Yeah.
And then you fill your cache, and then you continue to process. But that was a long wait.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like that. What could we do to not have to wait so much?
Go on the internet and order beer.
Okay?
Bigger
We'd still have
Bigger
to wait.
fridge.
Bigger fridge. Really, really big fridge. Whole closet. Right?
No, we don't do that. We buy a new car that has a built-in TV, and we park it in the HEB lot.
But it's a nice big TV right
That's
here, and
called
you're sitting in your
tailgating.
favorite chair.
Tailgating.
Right? But if you have a really big fridge, if you have lots of memory, you're not going to have that bottleneck of I/O, of secondary storage. Okay? So, getting memory is an important part. No matter how fast you can process it, if you don't have enough memory,
I'm going to send a guy down to San Antonio when the fridge is half empty.
Yeah.
yeah.
Prefetching.
But what if you get the wrong kind of beer?
A smart guy. We'll send a smart
Okay,
guy.
you spend a smart guy. Okay.
You've got separate lines in the cache. One for Shiner Bach and one for Sam Adams.
Exactly. Yeah. See, I like this analogy because we can take it in lots of different places. But fundamentally, the memory is an important part of what we're working with. So as a hardware part of our realization of all this, we're going to think in these terms. Basically, those three components. Okay. So, any questions or comments? Okay. So, onward. Ultimately, our goal is to create good software. And we want effective software. We want reliable, understandable, cost-effective, adaptable, reusable. Software can have a very long lifetime. You create the software, you test it, you debug it, you ultimately maintain it and then enhance it. Most of the time, the majority of the cost is after the initial creation. And you don't think oftentimes when you're writing the software, hey, they're going to be using this in 10 years or 20 years or longer. I remember I was teaching at Stetson University in Florida, and they wanted me to write a little piece of software, this in the early 90s, to keep track of their projectors and their library equipment. This was pre-internet, right? And so I write the software, they're using it, I move to Texas, go to graduate school. It's December of 1999. This was 1992 I write this software. It's December of 1999. And they call me and say, is this software going to work in 2000? Well, I don't know. So that's a very good question. I don't know if it's going to work or not. I hadn't really thought about that. I hadn't even thought about the software in at least 5 years, because maybe 10, since I wrote it. I was shocked they were still using it. So I just happened to have the source code and was able to fire it up, and it did work. luckily, thankfully, and I'm certainly hopeful they're not using it anymore. But it's one of the things you have to really think about is what's going to happen later. Okay? So, some principles as we're designing our software. A really important one is abstraction. So, anybody drive here today? You drove. Okay, so Andreas drove here today. At some point you had to go faster, yes? You had to go past a car.
Yeah, often.
He's German, you remember.
Oh, he's German. Oh, okay. So I may have picked the wrong person for this analogy, but let me think about what you were thinking. You were thinking, I got to go faster. I need to push on the accelerator because I know that it's linked to the fuel injection system, and the fuel injection system is linked to the computer in there, so that when I push on that, it will let in more fuel and more air, so that it'll have the exothermic reaction that it explodes and it'll turn the crankshaft and then turn the wheels. Because you were thinking that, right?
Not all of it, no.
But how did you go faster if you weren't thinking of all that stuff?
I know it goes faster, learning.
Yeah, you abstracted away the details, right? Of let's push down and go faster.
Yeah.
Right? All of those
He was
details.
driving a German car. And German cars are done that way.
You
press down and they go
think
fast.
You
about it.
assume you just if you had to think about all those details all the time, it would be very complicated. Yes. So at some point we have to abstract that something's going to work, right? And so we have to think about what's relevant and ignore some of the details as we're doing things in life. Of course, I drove my Tesla here today. No, I didn't actually drive my Tesla. But if I had driven my Tesla, I could have pushed on the accelerator pedal and not worried what was behind it, but would it have been that same process?
No?
No. But it's the same interface, right? Because there was an electric engine on the other side of it. But I don't have to worry about that. I've encapsulated all of that information on the other side of my pedal. I wish I had a Tesla. My white minivan, is it the same as a Tesla?
It is.
I can think of it, right?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
You have my permission.
So, separating our components' internal and external aspects really allows us to do some wonderful things, because we can then have a constant interface that everybody will know how to use. I mean, we didn't have to retrain people when we got the Tesla out there. They sat down, they knew what they were doing. But they could change how it works on the other side, the implementation of the acceleration. Okay? Questions or comments or thoughts on that? So, I'm not keeping track of time, excuse me, but anyway, I grew up in northwest North Dakota.
Yeah, make one more teaching moment, so we
Okay.
have some time.
So, I had the best stereo in the world. All in one, I had a turntable, AM, FM tuner, 2 cassettes, an 8-track, it would record on an 8-track, all in one unit, which is pretty awesome, right? Until what?
So it's obsolete.
Well, it still works. But theoretically, if that tuner had gone out, guess what? None of my components work at that point, right? Because they're all interbound in one piece. Now, when I grew up and went off, now if I have a stereo, for students don't have stereos anymore. I don't know how that works. My analogies are getting a little stale, but you want to have separate components so that if one of them dies, you can swap it out, or one of them can be upgraded, you can get a better one. So constructing your system from components as opposed to all in one piece is desirable. Plus, when you're building software, you may not be, you may have other people writing some of the pieces. You don't have to write all the pieces yourself. You have other people testing those pieces, saying, hey, yep, that part works. We don't have to worry about that part. We can use it. We know what the interface is. We've abstracted. We don't care necessarily how it works. We know what it does. We know how to use it. Okay? Lastly, as we're building more and more complex systems, we will use pieces of other systems and functionality of other pieces and expand on them through a hierarchy of objects, of classes, etc. So, any questions so far? Okay. I think
Yeah.
15 minutes
Yeah, I
are
think-
probably up.
For modularity, go back to the car. Cars nowadays have more than 100 processors in them.
I know. It's
There's
amazing.
modularity.
Yeah.
And
Better than a stereo system.
Wow.
Because people
Yeah.
nowadays don't know what a stereo system
Even on the
is.
mechanical side, right? Big car
Mhm.
companies, that's why they can come up with so many different models. They just take the same components and reassemble it
Yeah.
in a different form,
Yeah.
right?
All right.
uh,
And put a different shell around it.